On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk about CAPTCHA is back, and it might be actually invading your privacy. Plus, Curtis, Bam, and Brian and I talk about open source projects and how they're being infiltrated and what that means for your organization. Plus, we talk about ransomware, how it continues to trend, and how it's targeting organizations that will actually pay up. Check out this and more. TWiET on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiET.
This is TWiET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 348, recorded June 28th, 2019. Pay me now or pay me later. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. It's back for its third season, and this time it's all about the epic history of programming languages. The first episode explores the origins and evolution of Python. Go to redhat.com/heroes or listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And by WordPress. Turn your dreams into reality and launch your website at WordPress.com. Get 15% off any new plan at WordPress.com/twit. And by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Find the right people for your business this year at LinkedIn.com/thisweek and get $50 off your first job post. Welcome to TWiET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. Today, we have a full house of enterprise tech professionals with 3 co-hosts. We are taking it to the next level, starting with our very own Mr. Geek in Paradise, actually, Mr. Brian Chee, Director of Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu. Cheebert, great to have you back, buddy. What's keeping you busy?
Apparently, a particular switch vendor is not playing nice, and I'm losing industrial switches all over campus and having to go into really grody power vaults to swap them out. And so I've got some really, really nasty, dirty T-shirts right now.
Well, speaking of experts, let's add another one to our panel. Our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, Senior Editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, is it finally sunny down there in the Sunshine State?
You know, it has been sunny the last few days, sunny enough that we're now starting to say, we could use some rain, which we're supposed to get the next few days. So that'll be a good thing. Aside from that, been following lots of security news and playing around with changing out the controller on a very large industrial laser cutter. So that's keeping me busy and keeping me enjoying life down here in the swamp.
Fantastic. Now, you're getting ready for Black Cat, right?
Yeah, it's coming up. We've only got a little over a month left, so getting ready for Black Cat and DEF CON. Looking forward to both of those.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, folks, we're taking it to the next level. And, of course, we got to bring in Mr. Brian McHenry, Director of Global Security Solution Architect at F5 Networks. Welcome back, Bam. What's keeping you busy?
Well, if you've been following the show lately, you know that I've been busy getting to know everything NGINX, and I'm actually looking forward to a little bit of travel next month. About third, fourth week of the month, I'm going to head out to the West Coast and check in with my friends in the F5 San Jose office, but also spend some time with our NGINX product managers and product team up in San Francisco as well. So pretty excited to just kind of get more deep into the technology and what makes NGINX tick, and how it can help just about everybody out there from the number of users that NGINX has.
Fantastic. Well, folks, today we have a pretty packed full show. Not only ransomware, OSS, infiltration, hardware. You can't ask for more topics. But before we do and get into all that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Well, CAPTCHA is, everyone's favorite little UI when you're trying to search for something, where you're trying to enter form data or you're trying to create an account, right? It's your favorite thing. I definitely love it, especially when I can't read the darn letters to re-enter them. I feel bad about myself when I have to use the text-to-voice feature so I can understand the letter combinations. And sometimes the I'm not a robot version of CAPTCHA is fun too. I sweat thinking of all the times I can't find the stoplight or the highway in the different pictures, but hey, I guess it's working then, right? Well, with the new ReCAPTCHA V3, you will no longer see the checkbox or the pictograms. Google has another way that they're going to start determining whether you're a bot or a human. I bet you're interested in what they're going to do, aren't you? Well, what happens now is they analyze the way users navigate to the website and assigns them a risk score based off of whether their behavior is malicious or not. Now, Google won't tell us exactly what the heuristics are so the hackers don't exploit it, but the combination of them makes it super hard for bots to get through. Now, to fool the system, a bot would need to understand what behavior on the site should be and mimic that well enough to trick the new CAPTCHA. Now, another new feature is the website administrators then get access to their visitors' risk scores and can decide how to handle them. For instance, if a user with a high-risk score actually attempts to log in, the website can set rules to ask them to enter additional verification information through two-factor authentication. Now, how many sites are actually using the new CAPTCHA today? Well, you may be wondering that because there are actually more than 650,000 websites already using ReCAPTCHA V3. Now, overall, there are at least 4.5 million websites using ReCAPTCHA, including 25% of them at the top 10,000 sites. In fact, Google is also now testing an enterprise version of ReCAPTCHA V3, where Google creates a customized ReCAPTCHA for enterprises that are looking for more granular data about their users' risk levels to protect their site algorithms from malicious users or bots. Now, part of the secret sauce, based on security researchers, is that the presence of Google's cookie installed in your browser is part of it. Now, it's the same cookie that allows you to open new tabs in your browser and not have to re-log into the Google account every time. Now, cookie-based data collection means it's collecting your browser behaviors all over the site as long as the CAPTCHA logic exists on those pages. Now, Google has said that the data captured by ReCAPTCHA is not used for targeting or analyzing users' interests and preferences. Well, after this story was published, Google said that the information collected through ReCAPTCHA will not be used for personalized advertising by Google as well. However, it makes you wonder, to increase the convenience, is it okay that companies might be compromising your privacy to do so? Think about it.
Well, more supply is being met by more demand in the cybersecurity job market, and that pesky skills gap remains untouched. While a variety of initiatives have worked to increase the supply of cybersecurity professionals, demand for cybersecurity workers has also increased, leaving the overall landscape in the jobs market unchanged. That's according to a report released on June 25th by Burning Glass Technologies. As a result, for every opening in cybersecurity-related professions, there are only 2.3 employed workers to pull from, almost exactly the same as 3 years ago. Now, by comparison, in the general U.S. job market, the situation is not nearly so dire, with an average of almost 6 employed professionals who could fill each job opening. The shortfall exists despite efforts to increase training because the number of programs for training workers in cybersecurity has grown by a third between 2013 and 2017, while the number of graduates has increased over 40%. Meanwhile, the number of job postings requiring cybersecurity skills has 94%. In many ways, the problem is the fast evolving nature of the discipline. It remains nearly impossible to hire a worker trained in the exact mix of skills that a business believes it needs. What's a company to do? Companies should identify internal employees who may have interest in being trained in security, and in addition, they need to focus on their cybersecurity pipeline, developing relationships with local universities and programs that train workers in cybersecurity disciplines.
F5 Labs researcher discovered an outlook for Android vulnerability. F5 Labs researcher Brian Appleby discovered a vulnerability in Microsoft's Outlook for Android app way back in December of 2018. In this article, breaking down the vulnerability on f5labs.com, Appleby details why the vulnerability, which makes it possible to read sensitive email data, took more than 6 months to patch from the time it was first reported. Appleby noticed an email that rendered its HTML code very strangely in his Outlook app late last year. After some research, he found that improperly escaped HTML made it possible to use JavaScript and iframes to leak information from the affected inbox. Unfortunately, reproducing the vulnerability proved difficult for Microsoft security engineers. Months later, Appleby couldn't shake that this was a serious vulnerability and came up with a new angle for the proof of concept code. In March, he resubmitted the new POC payload to Microsoft, which their security engineers were able to reproduce. This serious vulnerability, CVE 2019-1105, was patched on June 20th. It's always important for both individual and enterprise users to keep their applications up to date in order to lower the risk of exploitation of known vulnerabilities. It's also important to seek and report security vulnerabilities so we can all have safer products, and obviously keep our systems patched to avoid getting burned by these new holes when they are released.
Well, our friends at Google Hardware is quitting the tablet business again. Truth be told, I miss my Nexus 7 LTE tablet, but Google Hardware dumped it just like they're abandoning the new Pixel Slate. What this boils down to is that Google Hardware just can't seem to build tablets inexpensively enough to make a profit and is going to leave the Android tablet business to their partners. The really big problem is that while Chrome OS is gaining a bunch of traction in the education world, and trust me, a touch-enabled Chrome OS machine does rock, but Google Hardware doesn't seem to have what it takes to compete in razor-thin profit margin world of the tablet. I'm just quite sad, since Google's hardware has been exceptional, but sadly also exceptionally expensive, and thusly priced themselves out of the market.
Now, it's hard to trust some government organizations when we find out that about circumstances where they collect information when they aren't authorized to do so. While the EFF wants you to be aware, your phone records might be still part of the problem. Now, according to the recent documentation, new documents obtained by the ACLU and reported by the Wall Street Journal as well have revealed that the last year that NSA once again collected phone records of Americans that it was not authorized to obtain. Now, the NSA collected information including who phone number users were calling and for how long after a telecommunications firm began sending the information to the NSA, even though it had received no orders that would have authorized them to do so. Now, the name of the company is redacted. For years, it has been widely reported that large telecommunication firms like AT&T and Verizon have worked with NSA as part of Blarney, an NSA project that leverages commercial partnerships to gather intelligence. Now, this hasn't been the only incident of data being collected, obviously. This comes just a few months after a separate incident in which technical irregularities resulted in the NSA getting access to more records than it should have. Now, in response, the NSA erased 3 years of all of its collected metadata, which amounted to records of hundreds of millions of phone calls. Now, the documents released recently include an assessment by the NSA that the overcollection had a significant impact on civil liberties and privacy. Now, is this legal, you may ask? Well, the NSA's telephone record program conducted under Section 215 of the Patriot Act allows it to collect metadata of phone calls, including phone numbers, timestamps, and other identifying information. Now, this information may seem benign, but many organizations and outlets, including the EFF, have demonstrating how things like timestamps and phone numbers and GPS coordinates of where the phone calls were made can be stitched together to reveal potentially compromising information about a person. Now, metadata can, for instance, can have dire consequences for vulnerable populations who fear retribution for political beliefs, or whose metadata could be used in immigration enforcement. Now, with Section 215 up for reauthorization in December, this might be time for you to contact your state representative and get your voice heard.
NIST has issued IoT risk guidelines. NIST has issued a new report intended to help managers understand and manage the risks that come with Internet of Things devices throughout the device life cycles. The report provides a series of tables listing security expectations IT managers may have for conventional IT devices set against the way in which IoT devices are probably challenged in meeting those expectations. Now, while this report, which is the first in an anticipated series addressing the IoT, looks at higher level considerations. NIST says future reports are going to go into greater depth and detail about the individual related issues.
Well, it seems our favorite FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai is trying to kill San Francisco's attempt to spur broadband competition. Quote, the Federal Communications Commission will vote next month on whether to preempt a San Francisco city ordinance that was designed to promote broadband competition in multi-unit buildings. San Francisco's Article 52, approved in December of 2016, lets internet service providers use the existing wire inside multi-unit residential and commercial properties, even if the wiring is already used by another ISP that serves the building. San Francisco's Board of Supervisors and then Mayor Ed Lee approved it in order to spur competition in multi-unit buildings where occupants often have only one option for internet service. The ordinance only applies when the inside wiring belongs to the property owner. Under the rule, property owners who have outfitted their buildings with internet wiring cannot deny access to ISPs to make it harder for them to strike exclusive deals with the internet providers. The gist is that even if the property owner has spent the bucks to install the inside wiring, Ajit Pai is saying only the incumbent gets to play. Can anyone say Comcast puppet?
Now, many of you probably use VPNs, especially in the Comcast case. Now, they are useful, especially if you want to get around annoyance walls, prevent browser tracking based off of location, NIP, and other valuable reasons. However, they're not always the fastest in the world. Now, while WireGuard may have a solution for you. Now, WireGuard is a new peer-to-peer VPN technology that has the potential for higher speed, smaller attack surfaces, and more straightforward configuration than commonly used, better established VPN platforms such as OpenVPN and IPsec. Now, to date, it's been available on Linux, FreeBSD, macOS, Android, and even iOS. Why, you may ask? Well, lead developers on the project have made it known that they didn't want to inherit all the problems of OpenVPNs or OpenTAP adapter code. And after investigation of Microsoft's built-in VPN API on Windows, they wanted to stay away from Windows. Well, what's the solution here? Well, a software adapter, of course. Another one, a straightforward virtual adapter that could be used not only for WireGuard, but also for other projects that might need the same basic socket and tunnel functionality. Now, they dubbed the new adapter WinTune. Now, this was unlocked the ability for WireGuard to move to Windows, which is now in pre-alpha stages, but you can still test it. Now, the good news is that it's actually pretty easy to install with no development workarounds required to get it running happily on Windows 10 or on Server 2016 systems. Now they have a self-contained Sign MSI installer for both 64-bit and 32-bit builds. Downloading and running them just works, and with actually no complaints from Defender or any other services because of unsigning or so on. Now, how did WireGuard develop the workarounds? Well, it hasn't really been easy. They actually spent hundreds of hours in a disassembler reverse engineering the NTO skernels.exe and NDIS to make absolutely sure they understood that what was going on at the extreme low level. Now, usually development companies, they don't actually go through all that trouble and that level of detail to understand the inner workings of Windows. Now, this makes WireGuard port to Windows less of a port and more of a re-architecture and design of the system application. Now, connection times for this thing is actually pretty fast. They're pretty instantaneous, and the throughput is actually fairly excellent. Now, some have known to achieve 1.2 gigabytes per second upload through across a WireGuard tunnel from the Windows 2016 machine and above to a Linux machine. Now, download throughput across the tunnel capped at 380 megabits per second with support the support of almost all OSs soon. This means WireGuard might be the solution to the VPN performance woes that we have in the future. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bytes. But before we do that, we have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. Now, have you heard the story about the marathon sprint to create JavaScript in just 10 days? Were you actually aware that BASIC was born at 4 a.m. at a Dartmouth computer lab? Well, do you know the epic history of Perl? Well, Command Line Heroes is back for its third season, and it's all about programming languages. Now, from C to Lisp to Ruby to Go, the podcast dives into the original stories of some of the most prominent languages around. It also features conversations with guests like Bash creator Brian Fox, Python core developer Emily Morehouse, and Minix Andrew Tannenbaum, developer advocate Kelsey Hightower, tech journalist Clive Thompson, and many others. Now, episode 1 is out now, and it explores the origins and evolution of Python. Now, from Guido van Rossum's initial desire to build a language that could bridge the gap between C and shell scripting to its booming popularity among data scientists in the leading edge of deep learning. Now, Command Line Heroes is an original podcast from Red Hat, and it's all about the people who transform tech from the command line up. To listen and subscribe, go ahead and over right now to podcast platform of your choice or visit redhat.com/heroes. That's redhat.com/heroes. There you'll find the full episodes as well as bonus content. And you can even test your skills on the Command Line Bash arcade game. Now it's redhat.com/heroes. And we thank Red Hat Command Line Heroes for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. And for today's bites, I'm going to head to throw it over to Curt first. Curt?
Well, I've got one that's fairly interesting and awfully worrisome. And that's that it's almost certain that malicious actors are getting into the code repository functions of open source projects. And the worrisome part is they might have gotten into yours. The dependency trees of modern software development make smaller open source projects vulnerable to hackers who might have some, nefarious intent for the code. Now, no one is suggesting that there's wide-scale hacker infiltration for the big, well-known open source projects, but that might not matter. Because the fact is, the way that modern code development works, very small projects can have very large impacts. Now, let me give you an example. You have these dependencies, and that's where someone building a project will just go out and grab a function, grab a library, grab a bit of code that they bring in and use. And let's look at an example of just how big an impact a very small bit of code can have. Back in 2016, a developer named Ezer Koshelu, who had written 250 modules that were being distributed through a manager called NPM, removed them all. He did that for reasons of his own, almost all having to do with him being upset with the way the owners of NPM were doing things. But one of those modules, just one, was a very small 11-line piece of code that was adding spaces to the left side of a string of text to make it fit into a variable definition. It was called LeftPad. And as it turns out, it was used in things like Java development mainstays Babel and Node, and therefore used in thousands and thousands and thousands of enterprise and commercial programs around the world. Well, when he removed those 11 lines from the repository, thousands and thousands and thousands of programs broke. That's nothing malicious, but it shows the kind of impact that a small bit of code can have. Now, experts say that these small projects, which might well have a single maintainer and owner, are the ones where we're seeing the bad guys get in and do their work. As an example of where nefarious things could happen, they pointed to a package called Event Stream. In this, it was a single individual who was maintaining it, they ran out of time. Life does intervene. Someone convinced them, hey, this is useful. I can take it over. Well, they did take it over. And for a while, they kept the code going just as it was supposed to be. But ultimately, they inserted some code that would go out and make some changes, look for the credentials of someone logging into a specific Bitcoin wallet. If they found it, they would skim it, send it back to the nefarious individual, and the victim would find their Bitcoin wallet emptied. So what is there to do about this? Now, the open source model, the whole community is based on trust, and many of the projects have big trust procedures built in. The smaller ones don't. Now, some experts say that one of the keys is to be careful about your use of these third-party dependencies. I mean, if you don't have to write to use this 11-line block of code, just go ahead and write 11 lines of code. Others say that things like scanning and, of course, the mainstays of making sure that you are patching and updating regularly are there. But the fact is that this does indicate a significant concern. Now, I'm not saying that you need to give up your use of open source software. Gartner says that over 95% of all the enterprises out there are using some open source software in their internal development. But as the old saying goes, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. You might not have to pay a licensing fee, but that doesn't mean you can get away with no security expenditures. Now, I'm going to turn to my co-hosts, and Lou, since you are busy doing development work, I'll ask you, when it comes to open source code, how big a concern is this kind of security issue?
This is huge. This is actually really big. So most organizations, so most projects, let's say I'm actually an open source project. Most projects, they tend to have a bunch of DevOps, and they want to reduce the amount of time it takes for me to create a PR, commit, and get it kind of redeployed. So if I'm deploying a package or like to NPM or to NuGet, or if I'm deploying to a CDN, I kind of want to automate all of that. And so if somebody malicious somehow gets access to that and is able to actually inject code and commit it to the repo, that means that it could just automatically get deployed everywhere. And that doesn't mean that maybe the open source project doesn't do code scanning, it doesn't do semantic analysis, and so that just kind of leaks out. And then on the other flip side, as a consumer of these packages, I tend to kind of work on trust here, and I say, oh, great, new package. Well, part of my CI loop will be just go ahead and take that package, install it, run some functional tests, and then boom, I redeploy my app as well as a CD loop. So these kind of automated processes mean that you might forget that, you know what, maybe I shouldn't necessarily be trusting this code that I'm consuming. And the same flip side, that maybe, just maybe, the poster of the open source project shouldn't be trusting what gets injected as a commit. So this is actually a super huge problem. Now, from a perspective of an organization, what they could do is a lot of times before they actually ingest a new version of the project or the package, they could start running special security and compliance scanning of the code. Now, this means that it scans for, weird patterns around, like, for instance, if it's JavaScript, whether they're evaling scripts that are coming from weird domains, or if they're doing something odd in the actual scripting code, if there's weird text that wasn't there before. So there's semantic analysis you can run using linters and other tooling that can verify these things. Also, it can do a compare against the previous versions to tell you what's changed, which is actually super valuable, especially if you have a secure version versus an unsecure version. And that gets on, then before you actually do a CD or a CI, you actually get that approved by your team. So the team actually reviews the changes and makes sure they're not malicious in nature. So, but all of these things kind of slow down deployment and integration, which some organizations don't want. But if you're consuming a ton of third-party packages, that means that, let's say you have X number of packages, that means that you can potentially have multiplier factor here if a lot of them are changing, because a lot of them change a lot. So it really is a problem, and there's no real good way to do it just yet. It's a real time sink, and the organizations have to pay attention to it. So I'm not going to pretend to have the solution here, but what I will tell you is you need some kind of barrier between the two before you actually deploy and integrate.
Well, talking about barriers and integration and such, Bam, I want to talk with you about the next question. And that is, you have all of these large and small projects, and they are really reputation based. How do you figure that out, especially with these smaller projects, and especially when the layers of dependency can go on for anywhere from 2 to 20 different layers? You may think that you're getting a bit of code from one project, but they may themselves be using layer upon layer of other code. How does somebody figure that out?
Well, the enterprise customers that I talk to usually have practices in place, right? There's interactive and static code scanning, as you mentioned. The other thing is also, trying to maintain at least an inventory, right? We talk about, putting in defense in depth layers and compensating controls quite often, but we really don't talk enough in the security world, in my opinion, about keeping a good inventory. And that can be a lot of things. In the case of web app security, which is my sort of area of passion and expertise, it's keeping an inventory of all your web apps and their web app dependencies, and what's facing the internet in particular. You got to know what's facing, and a lot of organizations don't have a good accounting of that, and it's often how they get owned. Similarly, with the question of what open source packages do we use, have a good inventory of what's in use. At the very least, then if you're impacted very quickly by the announcement of a new vulnerability. So having a really good inventory is job one, and two, there's a risk assessment, right? So take for example Red Hat, right? Red Hat maintains an open source Linux kernel. Your risk assessment there is probably pretty low because Red Hat's patching things. You've probably got a maintenance agreement with them. Things are good there, right? That's a really well-maintained project that has a lot of its own checks and balances and controls. Now, if one of your developers comes to you and says, "I got little open source project over here that really just solves a unique problem for me. It would take me X days or people hours to solve this problem and code myself. So we want to bring this on as a dependency." Well, those are some things you can do. You say, all right, well, this is risky because there's two developers, halfway around the world who, that maintain this code. So the important thing to do there is to remove some of the things that Lou was mentioning, right? Anything, auto CI/CD, right? Anything where it would automatically suck up new changes. So, if the maintainer of the code, even if there's those two guys or two gals who are out there maintaining that code are doing a really good job and are staying on top of things, it's still only two people. They're just not able to do the same kinds of in-depth security review as a larger open source project. So for them, you probably don't want to auto update or auto consume their patches. You want to have a chance to, take a look at that code, any kind of changes before it gets pipelined into your system. So it's about, as you mentioned, before you threw it to me, put up a couple walls in between you and the riskier bits of code you depend on.
Okay, so we're back to this wall notion, and I think that's a good sort of visual analogy for people to keep in mind. But Lou, I want to come back to you because we're talking about all of this depending on really having a pretty good idea of all the code that you're using. And first of all, is that possible in today's world of agile and DevOps and other very fast-moving development methodologies? And if it is possible, is it enough? Is that really the foundation piece that you need to have in place before you think about anything else?
Yeah, I think, is it possible? That's hard. I mean, that's hard to say, because you can go look at some open source projects that are out there today, and they could have hundreds and hundreds of dependencies, as Bam had said. Like, they could have so many dependencies, and all of these things are changing. Like the normal patterns you see today is NPM packages. They change like, daily, sometimes multiple times daily, because people commit things, they run through some tests, and then they resubmit or redeploy a package. So it's really hard to keep up with all of it. So in the case of web tech, like for instance, NPM packages, there are tools out there, like Bam was saying, that will help you inventory things like Rush or Lerna. These are tools that will say, hey, I'll go into my repo and I'll determine all the different packages and make sure they're potentially all in the same versions, and that it'll actually inventory them for you. But, after that, like once you know that things are changing, you really have to know what's going into those packages. If one package depends on another package and you have inventory that, hey, the secondary one's changed, you don't have a direct dependency on it. You have to verify that even though you don't have a direct dependency on it, that package hasn't injected a vulnerability into the code base. And so it's actually quite cumbersome. So you think, hey, I'm just going to take a dependency on an open source package because I don't then have to write the code, and again, it's well maintained. That means that there could be some issues there. It could increase the amount of time it takes to maintain them. So it's one of those things. It's a guiding balance of, hey, if the code is not too complex, maybe it might make sense for you to go and build your own versus depend on a kind of a minimal open source project or package. But in the same sense, if you have processes in place to handle these scenarios, maybe it's okay that you take the dependency. So it's a guiding balance, but it's all dependent on the organization.
Now, that very last thing that you said, it's all dependent on the organization, is something I want to explore with Chee. Brian, you've worked for a lot of different organizations, both academic, government, and others. With all of the potential issues and the potential solutions that we've been discussing, do you see something that is going to work both for the commercial sector and one of these, say, more security conscious sectors like defense?
Well, the bottom line for the military is that we don't like inventing anything. The vetting process for software use in a military or Department of Defense or even a federal application is supposed to be very, very stringent. But the reality is there's a lot of dependency, and I use that word carefully here. There's a lot of dependency upon the organizations that write this. So this is the reason why you see a lot of the Department of Defense or federal partnerships with software organizations like Microsoft or Red Hat. There's a lot of regulations. Like I'm most familiar with NIST Chapter 8. And that was basically a whole long set of regulations and checklists and things like that on what I can and cannot use, and the vetting process that then has to be counter-checked, in this case by DISA. And the idea is, one, even though my developers or my engineers would have absolutely loved to use something like Mint or Ubuntu or something like that, the reality is in a classified environment, there has to be a level of trust. And in this case, we were limited to Red Hat and SUSE because both of those organizations had a vetting process set up. And one of the things that I toss out to the commercial world is there's actually processes involved. And having a U.S. federal government stamp of approval does, in most cases, give you a little bit of a warm and fuzzy that there's been a decent amount of effort to go through and vet not only the code, but also the people working on the code. So in the case of SUSE and Red Hat, the Department of Defense actually went and did background checks on all the employees that touched the code. So that might be something that the commercial world might want to consider. As much as I love open source, there is always a lack of skilled hands to work on it. Always a lack of skills. And you start, especially when you've got a lot of the community going and saying, hey, why isn't it done? Why isn't it done? Come on, get it done. We really want it. You start grasping at straws. And when you have volunteers, sometimes you just can't vet them. And this is one of the other big reasons why I keep telling my students, it's like, I love open source, but keep in mind, open source means you have a level of trust of the community that is working on it. And how do you know that someone isn't lying or fabricating their background? Whereas at least when you start dealing with things like, Red Hat, SUSE, and so forth, there has at least been a decent amount of vetting that has gone on, and it's a cooperative effort with organizations like the Department of Defense.
Well, there's a lot to think about here. As I said, I don't think the answer is to simply give up open source entirely, except in perhaps some very specific circumstances. But it does give us all something to think about as we are choosing code to incorporate into our own projects. Well, this is one of those things we could talk about for hours, but we've got a lot of other things that we want to get to in this episode. So, Lou, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know that there's plenty more TWiET to come.
Absolutely. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about ransomware, so don't go anywhere. But before we do, we have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's WordPress. Now, when you think of a blog or a site, for me, I think WordPress. Now, whether it's for you or your organization, if you have something to say or an idea you want to get out there, WordPress is going to make it easy for you. Now, why I had time to blog, WordPress was my platform of choice. I started with the free tier with them and their masterful wizard and their powerful site building tools that actually takes you through getting your custom site up in less than a minute. Now, if you like me, you like to browse all the options, thousands of themes to add to your site. So it took me a bit longer, but it still came out beautiful and it was easy to do. Now, no 2-week trials, hidden fees, and WordPress users own their content forever. Now, over time, as the site grew, I wanted more complex theming components and some support on how to do some of the more complex things, and I went to the paid tier. It's easy to switch, and it's totally worth your while. Now, WordPress is easy to get up and running fast, whether it's for your personal site or for your organization. Now, it can handle the complete spectrum of features and scale and creativity. Now, one of the most powerful features of WordPress is their plugin capabilities. You want a social streaming plugin to ensure your posts and content are advertised across social media? Well, use a plugin. Now, don't take my word for it. Go check out this stat. WordPress powers 33% of the internet. That's 1/3 of the internet is powered by WordPress. Now, Leo has been using WordPress for over 12 years. Check out leolaporte.com. But there are millions of other people and tons of large enterprise organizations powering their sites by WordPress too. Now, actually, I've been to some of the WordPress conferences out there where all the implementers and the designers and front end and masters alike come together and they attend the WordPress conference. And there are some of the most informational conferences out there. In fact, some of the most advanced front end developers and masters of the design I know started using WordPress and continue to use the platform today. Now, the great thing about this platform is not just for developers and front end masters. If you have an idea and you want to get it out there, WordPress is super easy to get started and it's fast. Now, with powerful site building tools, thousands of themes, 24/7 support from real experts, not fake people, from WordPress lets anyone pursue whatever it is that they love by launching a site that's free to start and room to grow. Now, the WordPress platform is so flexible and powerful. Some of the biggest companies on the earth use it to build their websites. Join the ranks of millions of people who use WordPress each day. For you, our loyal listeners, we have a way to sweeten the deal for you with WordPress. Go to wordpress.com/twit for 15% off any new plan purchase. That's wordpress.com/twit for 15% off your new website. wordpress.com/twit. And we thank WordPress for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, let's go back to the bites. Now, this one is interesting. Ransomware seems to be a consistent topic we talk about each and every week. Now, remember the city of Baltimore being held ransom? Well, Baltimore refused to pay a $76,000 worth of Bitcoin despite facing estimated ransomware costs of more than $18 million, of which $8 million was lost or deferred revenue. Now, Baltimore lacked cyber insurance to cover those costs. And in the case, there was also no guarantees that their data wasn't leaked or stolen from the network as well. Well, a new ransomware attack has happened, and the city of Riviera Beach, Florida, is facing similar challenges. Now, this time, ransomware operators are actually demanding $600,000 to regain access to the city's data. Now, the ransom was an order of magnitude larger than that of Baltimore's attack. Now, against the advice of the FBI, the Riviera Beach City Council voted to actually pay the ransomware. More than $300,000 of actually was covered by the city's insurance policy. Now, they are smaller than Baltimore with an IT department of only 10 people. And according to their latest recent budget, that they only have an annual budget of $2.5 million to support the total city government of 550 employees. Now, Baltimore has 50 IT staffers supporting 13,000 employees. It's not surprised that Riviera Beach's leadership decided to pay, given that the full incident response, given that the full incident response would have cost them 2 to 3 times what they agreed to pay the ransomware. Now, half the price tag was actually covered by insurance, but if you think about it, this leads into a little bit of a hint on the city's response that actually paying the ransomware means that it indicates that maybe they just didn't have effective disaster recovery plans. Sorry, I was reaching for that word. Now, to shift a bit, these types of ransomwares in the past were actually opportunistic. Now, there's actually been a shift on how ransomware attacks are being conducted. Now, originally they started out by being more opportunistic, where they kind of just blasted a ransomware campaign over the web, and they used Tor-based ransomware panels to actually communicate to victims and prove that they had keys of their unlock files. And in fact, they actually were allowed to do try before you lie decryption of few files just to be proof of that they have access. And the only downfall to that was that they weren't making much money. They really had normally $200 to $300 in Bitcoin only really 10% of maybe 100,000 people were infected would actually pay. Now, this type of thing where they were using ransomware services as tools, where they actually had hire English speakers to actually like customer support people and walk them through the process. But there wasn't really a good return on investment here. Now, there's actually been a shift, more targeted attacks. Now, these attacks are being more focused at specific organizations that potentially have a lot of sensitive data, but don't actually have the money to pay and potentially don't have assurances or disaster recovery to actually support this. Now, some targeted demands have actually aimed for payouts as large as $6 million, and they often don't have deadlines associated with them. But the ransom demands are priced to make the companies kind of pay up because they don't want to lose their data. And they don't want to have to go through the whole process of starting over. Now, communication is now done through email. It's no longer done through these peer-to-peer networks or other forums. And it's actually a lot easier for them to get through this process. Now, let's talk a little bit about disaster recovery. Baltimore's mayors claim that city backups were there in their case, but they didn't have concrete disaster recovery plans. Now, Baltimore's CIO, who actually came from a sales background, he really didn't have too much experience in IT operations, has been working in some form of disaster recovery plan, but it was really mainly dealing with power outages and not data loss. Now, despite these IT security managers, the city did not have insurance to cover this. So this brings me to my first question. I want to kind of throw this over to Chee first. Now, plans with like full incremental backups, ready to load, good patch management, other security practices, these ransomware attacks would kind of really mean nothing. It would just be kind of an annoyance. Chee, we talked about this before, but why aren't organizations making this as part of their plan as they expose themselves to the internet? What's going on here?
I think it's show me the money. I can't tell you every single IT organization I have ever worked with, have ever talked to, has all had one thing in common. They don't have enough money. either they got to spend the money on talent to, especially now that, with all the cybersecurity worries, which means something has to give. Maybe it's, okay, well, those backups are really great, but maybe we can cut back on them just a little bit because it's costing us a lot of money. Or, gee, that cybersecurity specialist is great. Can't we just train in-house? I'm actually going to throw out that the name of this show should be Pay Me Now or Pay Me Later. And to the city council people and aldermans and people all over the world, I say it's pay me now or pay me later. Either you start investing in this. If you're going to put that many eggs in this small little basket called IT, then you need to also invest it. You don't go and set up a bank and use a plywood door for your vault. You invest in a good vault door. I equate cybersecurity specialists and incremental backups, often incremental backups. And I even like going into using write once, read many, so you can only burn it once, so that backups cannot be changed if you mount them. I really, really, really miss large-scale, large-capacity worm drives. They have almost completely disappeared from the market. But those are actually a really, really good backup media for cybersecurity purposes, because once you commit to glass, it can't be changed, which means if someone mounts it and has already taken over a machine, they can't change that backup. So I think that's something we might want to really consider, that city councilmen, when you start looking at your budget, if you're going to be depending upon your IT group to help you make money on something or keep track of money or anything like that, you really and truly need to also invest in making sure you have a nice, strong vault door.
Absolutely. Now you have a good point here. Now it just goes to show you there's a lot of organizations out there, many government organizations and businesses that are just not prepared for this. Now, in fact, over the past few years, ransomware has really exploded here. Now, data from the FBI actually shows that another organization is hit by ransomware every 14 seconds on average. Curtis, I want to throw this to you. Why aren't organizations being prepared? What's going on here?
Well, what we're seeing in some of the organizations being hit is that really they're too small. For example, in the last couple of weeks, there have been 2 more Florida towns hit by either ransomware or a cybersecurity event, as they've called it. One is Lake City, a small town up in North Florida. The other is Biscayne, Key Biscayne, which is on a little island across Biscayne Bay from Miami. In the case of Biscayne Bay, it's about 13,000 people in the town, or Key Biscayne, it's about 13,000 people. Lake City is about the same size. So really you're talking about an organization, a government organization, that's probably got somewhere between 1 and 3 IT people. In the case of Lake City, it was a ransomware attack. They did decide to pay the ransom because they have cyber insurance. And so they said it cost them about $10,000 out of pocket. The rest of it came from the insurance company. And so what I think we're seeing is the attackers being much more selective about the cities that they're going after. They're not just randomly picking these government organizations. They're going after government organizations where either they know, because of the government's size, that they probably don't have a large IT group, or they have some sort of insider knowledge about deficiencies in the IT operation. So when you ask why aren't they prepared, there's no good answer for that. But in many cases, you do have these individuals who are doing the best they know how to do, but they've just got too much of the IT operation to try to keep track of. And as we all know, the squeaky wheel is going to get that grease, and users facing slowdowns, demands for new capabilities, those tend to be much higher noise factors than security right up to that tragic moment when they're not.
Right. Now, unfortunately, trends are showing there's really no slowing this down. In fact, there's a new trend showing that actually targeted ransomwares are seeking even bigger payouts, even more over time, and are being more sophisticated or going against more sophisticated organizations. Now, Bam, what do we do? What do we do to stop the bleeding here?
It's not just having a disaster recovery plan. It's actually testing that plan and knowing. I think a lot of these organizations, they don't really have a good handle on what their cost of data loss looks like, or even if they do, it's astronomical, right? So when developing a disaster recovery plan, start to spell out things like time to recover, right? Because attacks for ransom are not a new thing, right? Ransomware is due to the ways that we can use malware is a whole new flavor, but things like DDoS attacks for ransom have been around forever. But we've actually taken some of the wind out of those sails by providing such robust DDoS mitigation services that not only can help me mitigate DDoS, but can actually do it in such a fast fashion that paying for someone not to DDoS you is not really even a concern. So I think that the number one thing, right, if you have a disaster recovery plan, you got backups in place, that's one thing, but you've got to also know, like, how long does it take me to recover that data? How long does it take me to go from, all right, my stuff's been encrypted against my will, and how long does it take me to restore that data and get back up and running again? Because that's where the cost is, and that's how they know, to target you, because they know you can't recover quickly. So that's what I would counsel every enterprise out there is really know, if this bit of data gets encrypted and you need it back, it's not enough to know you have a backup of it. Know how long it takes you to recover, and that's where you can start to make the case for, as my good friend Brian said, pay me now or pay me later. If you want your executive team to pay you now to prevent this nightmare from occurring and putting you on the front page, be able to say, all right, right now what we're paying is giving us a time to recover of 3 days, in which time the lights go out in the city, we're never going to get back on our feet again, or the time to recover, if we pay X amount more, the time to recover drops to 3 hours, and then it becomes basically a wash, and you can actually really recover. Your backups are actually now meaningful. So that's really understand your time to recover and develop plans that measure the value of that time.
Well, folks, we're running low on time, but before we close up, we want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Now, let me ask you, where are all the professionals at today? They're on LinkedIn. Now, if you're ready to hire for your small business or your enterprise, then naturally want to find the best person for the job, right? Well, odds are that person is on LinkedIn. Now, it's the world's largest professional network. 70% of the U.S. workforce is on LinkedIn. Some of the biggest names in the industry post content there every day. I post there. I post jobs, interests, technology, everything. Now, my professional network wouldn't be what it is today without LinkedIn. Now, that goes to show you that LinkedIn can really help your business grow. Now, post your job where people go every day to make those connections, grow their career, and also discover job opportunities. Now, you have used other sites before, I'm sure, but they just don't feel right? They're clunky, plus the responses you get are really not from the right people. Well, what I've seen from my job postings on LinkedIn is that LinkedIn jobs are matched based on skills and background, but they add to that secret recipe, that secret sauce, by also matching based off of interests, activities, and passions as well. That actually means that LinkedIn will match you quickly with a group of most relevant qualified and candidates for the job you're looking to fill. And that way you can focus more on the candidates that you want to spend time talking to and make a quality hire that you're excited about. Now, more than 610 million members visit LinkedIn every day to make connections, learn, and grow. And in fact, LinkedIn members add 15 new skills to their profiles and apply to 35 job posts every 2 seconds. Now, LinkedIn is the best way to get your job opportunity in front of the right people. Why else would customers rate LinkedIn jobs number one in delivering quality hires? Now, it's because it just works, and it gives the tools to target your next generation workforce with laser precision. Now, I bet you've probably surprised to know that a new hire is made every 8 seconds using LinkedIn. Now, having used LinkedIn a bunch of times in the past, it really is amazing how fast it will scale your talent acquisition using it. Now, to get $50 off your first job post, go to linkedin.com/thisweek. That's linkedin.com/thisweek. You get $50 off your first job post. linkedin.com/thisweek. Terms and conditions apply. And we thank LinkedIn for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, before we close up, I do want to ask one more quick question. I'm going to throw this over to Curtis really quick. In regards to, a lot of times we hear about cyber insurance and cyber attack insurance. Are organizations really using this as a way out? Are they using it as a way to not have to pay and actually have disaster recovery plans? Is this just an additional kind of assurance for them? What's going on here?
I think it's an additional assurance for most organizations, although I will tell you that I have heard some security experts complain that these companies and organizations are using their cyber insurance as a way to avoid having to pay to boost their security profile. Now, the good news from the perspective of those who want companies to have the best security profile possible is that we're beginning to see the insurance carriers go in and require organizations to certify that they have minimal levels of protection and minimal levels of remediation capability before they'll actually write the policy. So I think what we're seeing here is a transition time. There was a period a year or so ago when I think there were organizations who said, well, rather than buying good security, we can just buy good insurance. Now it's more a case of we need to have insurance, but the insurance carrier is going to work with us to make sure that our security is as good as possible. And then we can lean on them if for some reason that very good security still doesn't quite get the job done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Curtis. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 ransomware bits and bytes. But I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, my enterprise tech co-host panel here. Starting with our very favorite security journalist, Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks go and find you and all of your work?
Well, as always, they can find my work over at darkreading.com. I've got an interesting piece coming up this next week. I'm going to be looking at how you can keep a rogue Raspberry Pi from wrecking your security. That's going to be fun. Would love it if the TWiET Riot would check it out. I'm also getting ready, as we pointed out at the beginning of the show, to head out to Black Hat and DEF CON in Las Vegas. That's going to be the first week of August. If you're going to be there, let me know. Would love to meet up with members of the TWiET Riot. And if you're not going to be there, but there are specific things you would love for us to cover, let me know. Drop me a line. Hit me up on Twitter at KG4GWA. Would love to make sure that we take care of your security information issues.
Thanks, Curtis. We also have to thank our geek in paradise, our other co-host in crime, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, where can the folks find you, all of your work, and how can they pitch you some ideas?
Well, I am ADVNETLAB on Twitter, or I'm Cheebert at twit.tv. But better yet, why don't you hit TWiET at twit.tv, and that hits all the hosts. And I'm going to throw one last thing out that you know how I was talking about optical disc jukeboxes? Well, we actually had Horst Schelling on from HIT Corporation in Germany on in episode 129. So set the Wayback Machine, go take a look at it. It might be a good answer for your staged backups.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cheeber. Well, we also, not last but never least, we have to thank our very own Mr. Brian McHenry. Brian, where can the folks find you, F5 Networks, and a little bit about NGINX?
So, NGINX.com for the commercial product. And I would encourage you to go and check out F5Labs.com. F5 Labs is F5 security and threat research team, and they publish a ton of free research there, everything from malware to banking Trojans to the latest web application security vulnerabilities, and really just a ton of good free information. No product pitches over there, just all good free information and some great columns in the CISO to CISO area. Really love what they're doing over there. That team gets to do all the fun stuff and not worry about who's paying the bills. So check out F5Labs.com. Get free application threat intelligence, and you can follow them at F5 Labs on Twitter, and you can check me for all the choicest bits from F5 Labs at BA McHenry.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Well, also, we have to thank you as well. You are that person that drops in each and every week to watch and listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news. Now, go out right now to our show page at twit.tv/TWiET. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, plus all the show notes, co-host information, guest information, links to all the stories that we do during the show. And more importantly, next to those videos, there you'll get those more really helpful download and subscribe links that you can actually support the show by getting the audio version of your choice, the video version of your choice, and of course the HD video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices as well. It's really the best way to get your enterprise and IT news. Now, after you subscribe, share the show with your friends and family and coworkers. We love doing this show, and if we get more subscribers, we can definitely keep doing it. Now, also remember, we do this show live each and every week. We're at 30 p.m. Pacific time at live.twit.tv. Come see how the show is run behind the scenes. Of course, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room live as well, irc.twit.tv. There we have a really amazing chat room set of characters. They give us some really great content. They ask some great questions. They really help us shape the show. So go ahead and jump in and join the crowd. Now, don't forget, you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There you'll find all of my content that I post each and every week, especially what I do here at Microsoft. Of course, you can always check out dev.office.com. There you can find all of the stuff that my team does and actually empowering you to go and actually customize Office and make it more productive. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. Especially thank you to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week to do This Week in Enterprise Tech. And we couldn't do the show without them. Also, thank you to all the engineers at TWiT. And of course, thank you to our very own Mr. Brian Chee, Cheebert, who also is our tireless producer. He does all the bookings, the plannings for the show. We really couldn't do the show without him. So thank you to him and all his hard work. And of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our very own TD for today, Victor. Victor, you know the tradition. What was today's show topic?
Something about Brian looking for switches, and I think I found footage of Brian looking for those switches. I can see why you have to change your shirt a lot. But be careful down there, Brian.
Thanks, Victor.
And
close, Victor.
Don't be
close.
afraid.
I would say really close, but I would say disaster recovery would be it for sure. But maybe next time, sir. Maybe next time.
All right.
All right. Sounds good.
Actually,
and until
weren't we
next
talking
time,
about Fram oil filters?
Fram or pay me now or pay me later. Is that what you get from?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and that was going to be the next thing. Like Brian Cheebert's definitely going to want to be paid now when he's down in the sewers like that, looking for those switches.
That's right. All right. Let's close up this guy. And until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiET.